Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. We really appreciate your time. This is a Healthy Mindsets for Data Scientists workshop, and it's a bit different from our standard workshop. While most of our workshops tend to be technical, so what I mean by technical is like learning how to code or learning math or learning different skills that might directly pertain to your career, this is a more soft skill oriented workshop. But that doesn't mean you're not going to learn like very valuable skills for your career and the development of your career. So whether you're a freshman, senior, master's student, wherever you are in your data science career, a lot of this information will be really important. So yeah. A little bit about myself. I'm currently a fourth year data science major with a psych minor. I interned at Amazon this summer as a software development intern, and currently I'm at Tesla for data science and software engineering. I like to collect trading cards in my free time, mostly Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic cards, and in my free time I really do enjoy running. I definitely picked that up while I was in Austin this summer. If you've ever got there, there's some really great running trails, so I highly recommend you check those out. And I'm the current director of workshops for DS3, so I think some of you have been to the workshops this quarter, so if you have any feedback, let us know on how we can improve, how we can make better workshops, and if you want any workshops in the winter and spring. Some important things to note is that I'm still learning. As much as I'd like to be really seasoned in the field, a lot of this workshop will be about stuff that I've experienced and stuff that I've heard people experiencing. So yeah, I think it's really informative to pass the wisdom around and kind of help people who are getting into data science avoid common pitfalls that you'll see as you go through your career, as you go through school, and as you finish up your career. If you want to reach out to me after the workshop, my contact info is on our newly hosted website, ds3.ucsd.edu/workshops. You can find old recordings of workshops you might have missed, as well as the upcoming workshops. And we currently have the calendar and committee member page as a work in progress. So once that's up, you should be able to see all the workshops for the winter, all the workshops for the spring, and all the committee members who are working really hard to get these workshops set up for you. So a little bit about the purpose of this workshop. I've split this workshop up into 3 different time periods and 3 major hurdles that you will face at these different time periods. The first one, which will mostly pertain to people who are freshmen, sophomores, or people just getting started in the field of data science, is about how do you start and where do you start. The second part of this workshop talks about your first time in industry or research. So this might be your first internship or your first major research opportunity. I know some people pursue more of an industry related, so going out and working jobs, and other people might pursue a more research oriented type of role. So it's good to understand the importance of both and the hurdles you might face in both. And the last thing I want to talk about is what to do after you've worked in industry for a while, what to do post-grad, what to do when you have a job set up or a research role set up. I really want to talk about how we can minimize stress and set ourselves up for success, because a lot of the time we go into these roles blind. We go into these roles kind of confused where we stand in the role or what we have to do with the role. So it's really important that we learn from others' experiences and understand how we can really succeed in these different fields. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to raise your hand or interrupt me at the end of the slide, just so I can finish the current slide and we can answer any questions. Or if your question gets answered throughout the slide, that's also a great thing. So yeah, before we can get started, while most of you are data science majors, I did see some of you guys are not. So it's really important that we first understand what is data science, right? So some people like to think of data science as, well, a knockoff CS degree. I'm sure a lot of us have applied to computer science and we ended up in data science, which, to be completely honest, that's what I did. And it was a kind of a blessing in disguise, because a lot of the skills that I've learned in data science actually tie back to my original interest in computer science and has allowed me to be exposed to a lot of the different fields within data science that I think are much cooler than computer science. So we're definitely not a knockoff CS degree. We're also not a CS and statistics degree. While a lot of early programs in data science were basically computer scientists who also double majored in statistics, it's no longer the case, and the field has grown and developed rapidly. So a lot of the skills that you've learned in computer science and statistics no longer make you a data scientist. You could also say it's the study of machine learning, or I've heard a lot of people say, oh, you're a data scientist, so you know how to use TensorFlow, right? Or you know how to build a neural network. That's not entirely true either. Both in, you don't learn as much as just dedicating yourself to machine learning, but you definitely don't know, or you do know something about machine learning. So I wouldn't classify data science as the study of machine learning either. So what exactly is data science? Well, according to Wikipedia, there's this really fat definition here that I'm not going to read, but it is a interdisciplinary field where you can take data and apply different scientific processes. So I'm sure you guys have heard of the scientific method at a certain point in school, whether it was first grade or senior year. But yeah, we learn a lot of these scientific methods, and how we apply them to data is essentially what data science is, according to Wikipedia. But that's also not the definition that I like for data science. I think about data science as the study and application of information around us. And what I mean by information is I don't mean the tabular data or the CSV files or whatever type of data you're getting. Information is just anything around us. Any sort of spoken text or interactions or even wisdom that you've accumulated working on different things, that is information. I think data science is probably one of the most broadly applicable fields that you can be in. So if you're studying it now or if you're looking to get into it, you should be excited because a lot of these skills that you learn help you do any sort of problem or help any sort of problem. So I think a data scientist is more accurately described as a problem solver or someone who just takes any sort of general information and uses it in a really cool way. So once again, I just want to distinguish information is not the same as data. I want to refer to data as the stereotypical tabular data or visual data or image or text data, and information is just any sort of input that you might receive. Data scientists use tools like code, models, statistics, and data to abstract findings from this information, but information in itself could be anything. Just a show of hands, does anyone want to give an example of what they think information might be? So yeah, go ahead.
Everybody's name.
Yeah, someone's name, right? Or I like to think of maybe in your network, right? The people you know, that's another form of information, right? So once again, information is just this broad idea and broad set of tools that we can use to help our data science career. So let's talk about the first hurdle you'll face as a data scientist, and that's where do you start? This isn't a hurdle that's entirely unique to data science. I'm sure no matter where you are, no matter what field you're in, you'll often ask yourself, where do I start or how do I start? So most people will tell you to learn to code, which I think is really bad advice for anyone. But I think the best place to start with data science is to look at your own hobbies. What hobbies do you have and what hobbies do you love to do and how you might apply data science to those hobbies. So for me, for example, I really like to collect trading cards. So how might I apply the hobby of trading cards with data science? The second thing you should think about with your hobby is, does data exist for it? That's a really important question because sometimes data sets might not exist for your hobby. So that doesn't mean your project is impossible, but for a first project or starting out, you might want to look towards a hobby that might have an existing data set. So if you like to do woodworking, for example, I'm not sure if there's a woodworking data set. You could create your own, which would be a really cool first project, but you might want to go towards something that's more oriented or has an existing data set. So does anyone play a sport or does anyone have like a hobby that they just like to suggest? Anyone can go ahead and throw out an answer. Basketball, right? So if you're thinking about basketball, there are a lot of pre-existing data sets about NBA players, their statistics, their points, how often they play, what positions they play. That's an existing data set for something that you might be interested in. It's really important that we keep this interesting hobby as the center point of our first project. You have to think, what kind of project could you do for this? Would this be a more exploratory? So what I mean by exploratory is you take data and you draw insights from it through plots, by cleaning your data, through cool visualizations. That's an exploratory project. There are projects that are more vision-based. So you have images, you're classifying these images and you're saying, oh, well, what can I draw from this image? There's text problems, right? I think a lot of people like to use Twitter as a common example for text data. And if you dropped by the NLP workshop, you'll also see Twitter is a great example of text data. While Twitter might not be a hobby, I hope it's not a hobby for anyone, that's a great example of something that has data that exists for it and a type of problem. Is there someone experienced in your topic? That doesn't mean you have to find an experienced data scientist, but for the basketball example, if you know an NBA player, they might have some information that might be useful for a project that you don't know. For my trading card example, a great way for me to have gotten information or gathered information was I went to card fairs or places where people would like to sell cards because I was able to learn a lot about, well, what goes into like a card or the value of a card. Someone who's experienced doesn't have to be a data scientist by title. There are plenty of really experienced people who can mentor you through your project without having knowledge of data science, but it is also nice to have someone who has data science experience. So if you're starting out, a great recommendation I would suggest is to just reach out in the DS3 Discord and ask, hey, does someone have a bit of extra time to mentor me on this project? It's really beneficial to someone who is mentoring because oftentimes the best way to reinforce a skill is to teach or to mentor yourself. So there is some sort of return there, and you can highlight that return by saying, hey, like, I think this project would be really cool, and this is why. So for your first project, here's some important things to consider. You don't have to finish your first project. I'd say the first project is the most important project to start, but the least important project to finish. When you start a project, you learn how to find a data set, you learn how to formulate a question, and you learn some basic tools that can help you with your problem. So even if you don't master something like Python or Pandas, you'll understand that it exists, that it's out there, and in the future, when you start your second or third project, you'll say, hey, I know from my first project, Python and Pandas might be a great way to clean my data here. So now that you know this tool exists, you've actually learned something from your first project, and you've started. I think a lot of people go in for their first project and you have this expectation that you have to build something really grand and you don't really see the scope of the project. So when I was a freshman in college or even a senior in high school, I thought, well, if I start a project, I might as well make like a Facebook, right? Or I might make this big app that's going to be used by everyone. That's not really realistic, right? My first actual project was probably something like tic-tac-toe or Pong. And it's okay to start there. And it's even better that you don't finish, right? Because when you don't finish a project and you go through those failures, you can reflect back on those failures in the future and use those to improve some projects in the future. So let's talk about our first job. A lot of the time, people are a little stressed about getting your first role because you'll see on LinkedIn or you'll see on Handshake or anywhere you look for jobs that a lot of jobs require experience, which is quite strange because entry-level jobs should be giving you experience. Well, it's obvious that the first job you get has to be at Google. There's no other option, right? Just kidding. A great first job, I think, is tutoring or any form of tutoring. The reason for that is because we're all students, and tutoring is a great way to, once again, mentor someone else and reinforce existing skills. All of the data science courses, computer science courses, cognitive science courses, they offer a form of tutoring that you can sign up for, and they'll pay you $20 an hour, so I think that's a great little add-on. It's always nice to be paid, but you don't have to go through the school. Tutoring can be done in any form. You can do private tutoring, which pays a lot more than working with a school, I'll tell you that. And tutoring lets you, work with a customer for the first time. You have to go and reach out and create like an advert and say, hey, like I'm a student. You have to advertise yourself to the people you're tutoring, right? Say, this is a skill I can offer you. You're my customer, how can I help you? That's an important skill that you learn from tutoring outside of just reinforcing your existing skills. There's a lot of campus opportunities all throughout campus. So that means in DS3, they have the projects committee, which just opened, and the consulting committee. So those two committees in themselves provide you work experience that isn't the traditional work experience. You can also apply to campus roles themselves. I believe the bio department or the chemistry department or all these different departments at school, they're always in demand for software developers and data scientists. So reach out to those campus opportunities. Those are really where you're gonna get the meaningful experience and your first kind of exposure to industry or research that you can't get through an entry-level job or you can't get through tutoring. Some other orgs off the top of my head that I highly encourage you to check out might be Try AI or Try Software Engineering or even Diversity and Data Science. They all have campus opportunities that I highly encourage you to check out. Summer internships. They're not restricted to juniors. They're not restricted to seniors. They're open to everybody. So whether you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, you should always try and apply to summer internships. The worst thing that can happen is rejection, which is probably advice you've heard for asking out someone as well. But it's a really great thing to start applying for internships early. The reason why is because if you face rejection earlier on, in the future when you're a junior, senior, and you're applying to full-time jobs or internships, you're more used to understanding, oh, for every 100 internships I apply to, I'll actually probably only get 1 or 2 opportunities. Also, applying to these internships early on exposes you to interviews and the problems you'll face in those interviews. So even if you absolutely butcher the interview, I've definitely messed up hundreds of interviews in my experience. It's okay because failing those interviews, going through those interviews are really important because long term, in the future, when you're really applying and it's really important for you to get these jobs, you've actually already done hundreds of practice problems through these interviews that you didn't do well on early on. Also, a lot of these companies do hire freshmen. I don't think the work you do as an intern is something you can't do as a freshman. I say after you take DSE 20 and 30, you're already pretty much set for any software development role. Those basic skills will really carry you a long way. So, in summary, once you start the job, there are a couple things you should think about. What are you trying to learn from this job? What skills and what technical skills and soft skills are you trying to take away from this job? And how can you contribute? This isn't always through coding. Meeting with your teammates and coming up with ideas, writing documents, and coding are all different ways you can contribute. Don't judge your contribution to your job or your internship by how much code you write. Other times we think that that's the end-all be-all metric, how good are you at coding? But I've met a lot of really talented developers who aren't the greatest at coding, but they think in different ways. That's why it's important to visit workshops like these where you can develop your thinking and understand these pitfalls, because someone will be really good at coding but will be lacking in another department, and that's the importance of teams at these companies. You fill in for where someone else might not be as skilled, so it's really important that you contribute in forms other than coding. At the end of the job, you should reflect on what you learned. What skills did you learn, and what skills can you improve on? Did you really struggle with something? How can you improve on what you struggled on? All of these experiences add to something that's called your knowledge stack. So what's the knowledge stack? The first time I heard the knowledge stack was actually from a startup founder I met over the summer in Austin. And he described how he approached learning and how he developed his skills to create a successful startup. And that's through this idea of a knowledge stack. So what I have here is the data science knowledge stack, and essentially the knowledge stack is just all the skills, experiences, and wisdom you've accumulated through your data science career. I want us to take a step back and think about the knowledge step in a bigger term, in terms of life, right? Throughout life, you'll try and start things, you'll fail at things, you'll do great at things. Those all contribute to your knowledge stack, and the knowledge stack is probably the most fundamental, important thing you can do when you're building yourself up as a person, when you're making yourself employable to people. I think it's really important to develop this knowledge stack. That covers the first hurdle. Does anyone have any questions? Great. Let me know if I'm going too fast or if I can slow down or anything else. So yeah, let's move on to the second hurdle. You've gone ahead and you've done your first project, you've applied to your first experiences, you've built up that resume a little bit. It's time to apply to your first internship, big research opportunity, and get the job. So here are some common questions that you might have when you're trying to apply to these internships, when you're applying to these full-time jobs and these research roles. Number one, how do you build your resume? Number two, how do you talk about your experiences? How do you make yourself desirable to be employed? Step three, actually applying and interviewing to these different places. One important thing to note is that your degree doesn't really matter too much. Your skills are what's important. So just because you have data science on your degree doesn't mean you're guaranteed the role. And just because you don't have data science on your degree doesn't mean you're not guaranteed the role. I think this meme sums it up pretty well, but sometimes your degree is just a piece of paper and that's all it is. It might be the ticket into the door, but it's not the end all be all. So let's talk about some things that we can do to get the role. Number one, working on your resume. We have a lot of resume workshops in the DS3 channel that's hosted by DS3 all the time. We also have a channel dedicated to reviewing resumes. So one good thing to do with your resume is to reach out to DS3 ACM, one of these on-campus communities. Even our career advisor here, she's really great. They can help you build up your resume and really help you develop, a strong resume that will get you the interview. Once you get the interview, it's really important that you describe your projects and experiences in a really succinct and impactful way. One example here is using the STAR technique. This is a technique that is really used throughout engineering, specifically mechanical, environmental, electrical, and it's how they describe their tasks and problems. So the STAR technique involves describing your situation. So what's your problem, right? What did your project set out to solve? The actual task, like what did you do in that project? What did you do to solve that question? Action, the actual techniques, the code, the thinking that went through solving the problem, and the result. Did your code improve the website's traffic or improve the response time of your website by how much, right? These are your metrics. This is a result. And this shows the impact of the project that you've worked on. The last thing you want to do is you want to apply everywhere. And I mean everywhere. Playing this internship game, this new grad role game, it's a numbers game. People who apply to 100 internships are less likely to get an internship or a job compared to someone who's applied to 500. Sometimes it's a little bit of luck, right? Your resume might get missed. Someone else might have just been a little more qualified because they were a little older or worked on a different project. It is a bit of a luck game, so it's important that you apply around and you don't really get set on a specific company or a specific role or specific anything. It is a numbers game, and realistically, out of all the applications, you're probably going to hear back from 10% and get an offer from 1. Here's some common feelings you'll have when you start out a new role. The first one, and this is a really common one, is, are you qualified for the role? Oftentimes, this can be characterized as specific syndrome, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, you usually are qualified for the role. They hired you for a reason, and behind closed doors, there are a lot of really talented people who are looking at your resume, and they all decided, hey, I think you're a great fit for the role, and they believe in your skills. So when you get to the role, don't be intimidated. There's going to be a lot of new skills that you encounter, and it's totally fine to be questioning your qualifications, questioning, am I doing the right thing? Am I supposed to be here? It's totally normal. What do you do when you're struggling? Well, your team and the people that you work with, they're all there to help you. When you're interning, when you're a new grad, when you're the first person, or when you're working at the job for the first time, your mentor, your manager, your teammates, they're all there to help, and they've all been in your shoes before. So definitely reach out to those resources, or even people outside of your team, right? It's important to network and meet all of these people and see how they can contribute and help you with your job. What if you mess up something and get fired? That usually won't happen, especially if you're an intern or a new grad. They probably won't give you access to something critical, so you won't be taking down Twitter overnight with a messed up Git push. But usually if you are working on something critical, it is good to always check with your manager, your mentor, or your other teammates before you make a one-way decision. So one-way decisions tend to be decisions that are one-way and irreversible. So that would be pushing something for production or something that could possibly take down an entire platform. But more often than not, you probably won't encounter that in your entry-level roles, in your internship roles. And if you do, just be cautious because I've met a couple people who've taken down production. They're totally fine, and they still have their jobs today. Are you doing enough? You didn't code a lot at your job. You didn't code a lot at your first internship. Totally fine. Once again, code is not everything. One really impactful thing that I heard from my manager at Amazon this summer was that your soft skills will carry you much farther than your ability to invert a binary tree or your ability to recite DFS from memory. A lot of these skills and algorithms will get you through the door, but your soft skills will get you to the more higher senior level roles and get you those salaries that make people go, whoa, I can't believe software developers are paid that much money. A lot of these senior roles are going to be, a lot of these roles will be achieved through your soft skills. So if you're looking to get that $500,000 role, it's really important that you develop these skills and you come to workshops like these. Public speaking, writing, teamwork, those really, really matter, and those are the things that managers will look for outside of your coding and oftentimes prioritize over your ability to code. Anyone can learn to code, anyone can be trained up with enough time to learn how to code and build systems, but not everyone is great at public speaking. Not everyone's great at writing, and most importantly, not everyone's really good at working with a team and being a cohesive unit. So some general tips and tricks. Be receptive to criticism when you're at your role. These senior data scientists and developers are passing their skills and wisdom down to you. Your job is to learn from them and absorb those skills and pass them on to other people. Network, network, network. The most appealing things about any of these companies is that you're going to meet people who are really smart, really talented, and they could hire you in the future or you could hire them in the future. So really focus on networking at your first role, at your second role, no matter where you are. Even in the library or in line for Panda Express, it's important that you meet people and develop these skills because that adds to your knowledge stack and that adds to the information you have access to. Keep a document and keep track of the progress of your role as you're going through your role. It's really important to kind of log, what have I been working on? What do I need to work on? And what skills can I improve? Learn to say no. Just because you're the intern, just because you're the new guy, doesn't mean you can be pushed around. You have to understand how to say no to specific tasks, or if someone gives you a task and you're afraid that it interrupts your actual priorities, it's really important that you say no and pass that task on to someone else. If the task is really important and you can't do it, somebody will get it done. So it's okay to say no. Believe in yourself. You're there for a reason, right? They hired you for a reason, so that's the most important thing. Avoid imposter syndrome. Oftentimes, when you have this first role, when you're working in a new environment, you often feel that you don't belong, you don't have the skills to be here, or you might do something that's really stupid and mess things up. I've been there. I'm sure anyone who's had a role before has been there before. It's really common to go through something called imposter syndrome, And it's totally normal to just understand, hey, I'm going through imposter syndrome. I don't feel like I belong, but this is temporary. I will learn the skills, and eventually everything will work out. So once again, it's totally normal to feel this way. Don't idolize other people as you're going through your job, right? Everyone started where you were, and one day you will be at whatever position your manager's at or your mentor's at. So yeah, it's important to support yourself throughout this process because the only person who can make all of change is yourself. So let's talk about the final hurdle, right? You've made it through college, you've made it through your internship roles, and you've made it through all of these different experiences and projects. What about the full-time role? What do you do when you've graduated? So I want to talk about this concept from Japan, and it's called ikigai, and it's the idea of combining your work with essentially like your life, right? How do you balance work and life? So if we kind of look at this diagram here, we'll see that they've split up they've created these 4 categories. The first category is something you love or what you love. The second thing is something the world needs, right? So the stuff that you're doing should be important to the world. The third thing is something that you can be paid for. As much as people like to deny it, money is important at the end of the day. You have to put food on the table. So something that you can be paid for is important. And lastly, something that you're good at, right? If you're not good at something, you'll often go through a lot of stress and a lot of pain. So trust me, all 4 of these elements combined together are really important for getting this sense of ikigai, or I think the translation is actually a reason for being, right? Like, why are you here? Why are you doing this job? So I kind of want to go through each of like the combinations of categories. So they kind of do highlight like what happens when you combine 2 categories, but we'll go through what happens when you combine 3 categories and a real life example of like when this might occur. So for the first one, the satisfaction but a feeling of uneasiness, that's what happens when you combine something you love, something you're good at, and something you can be paid for, right? So that might be working on a small feature on a big project, right? A lot of these big companies, you won't be working on the entire code base. You'll be working on a specific thing. Somebody had to add the battery percent sign back to iOS 16, right? That would be an example of this first category where you feel satisfied, but you're not like totally, like there's some uneasiness, right? You're getting paid well, you love your job, you're really good at it, but it's not really impactful to the world, right? You're not making a big impact. Actually, I think the battery percentage might not be the greatest example because that impacted my life a lot. But in general, when you're missing one component here, you'll have this kind of uneasiness. The second thing is what happens when you remove something that you're good at, right? So you're working on something you love, it pays well, it's something the world needs, but you're not really good at it. There's a bit of uneasiness here because you might lose your job. You're afraid, hey, I really love doing this, the world needs it, I'm getting paid well, but like, what if I get laid off, right? Or what if I'm not able to do that thing? And this kind of ties back to imposter syndrome, right? Like how you feel when you're developing these skills and you're not terribly good at something. This is what happens when you're doing something you don't love, you're good at it, and the world needs it. Money doesn't equal happiness, right? They can pay you a lot of money, but if you don't love what you're doing, at a certain point, you'll kind of hit this point where you're like, well, I'm spending a lot of time at work, but I really just don't enjoy this product. I really hate this product. You'll kind of have this idea of, well, money doesn't mean happiness, right? You're comfortable, but you're not feeling fulfilled. And the last thing is, once again, like something that you're not, I think I missed one. Up above, it's when you're not getting paid enough. So if you're not getting paid enough, can't put food on the table. But here, if you're not good at it, you could face, potential be laid off, right? You might be having fun, you might be impactful, you're getting paid well, but it's also important to be good at it because if you're not, you might get laid off. So why is it important to kind of reach ikigai, or this sense of being? Well, life isn't perfect and we can't optimize for everything. We should strive for ikigai even if we don't actually achieve it, because most people spend a third of their life at work, right? That's about 90,000 hours of your life that you spend at work. And that's assuming I think the average lifespan. So it's important that if you're spending so much time at work, it's something that is impactful to the world, something that can put food on your table, something that you love, and something that you're good at, right? If you're spending so much time there, it needs to be important to you. This plot here kind of just shows the amount of time you spend at different points in your life. And you'll see a lot of the time that you spend after college is spent at work, at school, away from family, and, in later parts of life, spent alone, right? So it's important that we capitalize on this time when we're working to really find something that is fulfilling to us. So I think the final question here is, what should you prioritize post-grad? Well, I think that depends on your needs. Some people might want to start something on their own. Some people might be content just living a comfortable life and working a role, and some people might not want to always be a developer. There are tons of different needs and cases, so whatever you want to do post-grad or whatever you want to prioritize post-grad is really dependent on you. There's no right or wrong answer to this question, but it really depends on your needs. So this is what you should keep in mind as you graduate. You've developed a lot of your skills, you've gotten this job, you're getting paid well, and you've made it through college at this point, right? Something you should really focus on is family and friends, right? I think oftentimes we do neglect the time we spend with family, the time we spend with friends, and time is pretty finite. So while you're going through your curriculum, you're really focused on getting this job, developing your technical skills, developing your education. Sometimes we neglect family and friends, so it is important to go back and revisit that and build new relationships. Experiences. I think experiences make up the person, and sometimes we think, well, I could go on this vacation, or I could spend this week coding and getting better at technical interviews, but sometimes it might not be the right way to look at it. Remember, think back to that knowledge stack. We're the sum of our experiences, so sometimes taking a bit of time off, traveling, building a project that might not pertain to your education or your career, all of these factors are really important, right? And they make us more whole as a person. And sometimes, even if you don't feel like something you're doing is directly contributing to your career or your development as an engineer, in some way it is. If you guys watch the Steve Jobs Stanford commencement on YouTube, he talks about how you can't connect the dots looking forward. And that's kind of correct in the sense that oftentimes when we're working through our career, working through our education, we don't really see the end result until we've reached that result. Once you see that result, you kind of see how all the different events in your life connected to lead you to wherever you end up or whatever the end result is. So it's important that you don't get too caught up in this is the exact steps I need to take to get a full-time software or data science role, right? A lot of these experiences make you more well-rounded as a person. It develops these soft skills and these skills that employers are really looking for. So learn to take a break, travel, and don't get too caught up in your data science careers. Your time is infinitely more valuable than any paycheck, any hourly wage, quite honestly, anything, right? Your time is something magical. It's something we can't get back. So it's really important that you're dedicated to something that makes you feel more fulfilled, whether that is, taking a break and playing a game of Fortnite, visiting Japan, or, working on a pet project. I think time is something that people start to lose a sense of, or people start to lose, value towards, but it is really important to prioritize your time and understand, it's your time, right? Everything you do is your time. You're giving people your time. So it's important that we value that a lot. You're driven. That's why you're here today. So the most important thing to take away from this workshop is as you're going through your data science career, whether you're a freshman, whether you're a graduating senior this year, it's important that you understand you're here today because you're driven. And it's okay to sometimes take a step back and say, well, I need a rest, or I need a break. Because sometimes getting too driven leads you to kind of tunnel vision in on a specific task, and it really makes you lose a sense of, what do I like to do? What do I value? How is my time valuable? The most driven people are the most susceptible to burnout. This is really common throughout our entire industry because we have a lot of smart people who are really driven and really working towards stuff. So once again, it's okay to take a break, right? There's an infinite amount of information and things to do out there. Find what's important to you, right? And don't pursue this, I need to know everything. I need to have infinite money. You don't, right? At the end of the day, fulfillment comes from within. So don't get caught on the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is this idea that throughout life, we will achieve different goals. And as we achieve these different goals, these goals don't actually improve our quality of life, and we really rapidly acclimate to our new state. So an example would be you get into college, right? But once you get into college, you feel like, okay, well, I'm in college now. That was a great success, but what's next, right? After that, you get a big paying job, and you get to that job, and you're thinking, well, I have this big job now. I'm very accustomed to this new life. What's next, right? It's really dangerous to get on this treadmill because there is no one thing that you can achieve that will make all the other things or make everything work out. So don't get caught on this treadmill. Just be aware that all of your achievements are great. Everything you've done up to this point has led you to where you are today, and that no matter what you do, it's contributing to your knowledge stack and it's improving who you are as a person. There's a lot of answers missing throughout this workshop. There's a lot of questions that can't be answered, but that's the cool part about being a data scientist. You're here to solve them, whether that's a question on PA5, whether that's a internship interview question or just general questions about yourself, sometimes the most important part of being a data scientist isn't the answer, isn't the result, isn't the grade or submission that you get, but rather the process in which you're learning, in which you're solving. I think that is the most important thing about the data science process, about being a data scientist, and the most important thing to developing a healthy career mindset as a data scientist. That concludes the workshop. We'll open up to any questions if there are any. This can be questions about the workshop, about general career things, about your courses. I believe we have about, I'll say like 10 minutes here to answer questions. So yeah, feel free to answer questions if you want to.